Hey everybody, Bridget Lynn Dolgoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project. Anyway, I wanted to do a video today. A little tired, kind of groggy. Been doing some work. Anyway, so I'm kind of working with some ideas, kind of like would be, Kabbalistic, not cabal, Kabbalistic, which is kind of like, I don't know, Jewish witchcraft or, ancient shamanism, Hebrew shamanism type stuff. And it kind of goes along some of the same lines, one of my favorites is a life predicted by time, which is something I read in one of Lynn Andrews' trilogies back in 87 or 88, whenever they came out. I think it was in her third book. All things exist by agreement and a life predicted by time. So right now I'm working with a Kabbalistic idea. So I've been working with a meditation in the morning that seems pretty interesting. That seems to kind of been unveiling where, the time that we're in, this physical reality time, and the friction that's just caused by the time, and the friction that's kind of created also by us, and it leads to roadblocks. So I wanted to talk about what is friction, right? Just some things. I wrote it down in my journal. I realized I haven't really wrote in this journal since July 2017, but that's okay. I'm writing in it now. I carry it around in my bag, and yeah. And so I have a lot of these journals kind of laying around, and so if anybody ever read them, they're not really in sync. It's just wherever I have one at the time, I'll write stuff down. And that's another issue that's been created by friction, the time, is that, I want to write in my journals more. I'm kind of sloppy in my writing. And that I want to spend more time, being able to write in a journal. I don't have to do it every day because that's going to cause friction. So I'm going to be projecting in my future, that I'm going to journal every day. And so that causes friction. That's going to cause serious friction in my life. And it's going to cause friction of me being in the flow, because in the Kabbalistic standpoint, that time already is causing friction, because we live by schedule, we live as a standard of time, and I suspect that it leads to, past, present, and future not happening simultaneously, and that it drags, you slow it down and it drags, and then you add on to the friction, and then other people around you include you into their friction, which, creates a multi-level, multi-layer, collective friction of blockages and flow. And we know, in soil, anything that causes, friction, like heavy friction in soil, kills microbial mass, which is essential for healthy soil. We can bring it down to so many levels, friction. So anyway, I was just going to give you the basic definition of friction. Just the weather is kind of crazy around here. We have it's sunny, no clouds, and the next thing you know, there's clouds and hail and snow and rain. Because they've caused so much friction in our geoengineering, because they're causing friction in the future because they're geoengineering now to cause this storm in the future, tomorrow, the next day. So just by that projection and that intent, it's causing massive friction. So it's causing, weather chaos. Okay. Friction. Surface resistance to relative motion as of a body sliding or rolling. Yeah. So I can have physical friction, right? I can have mental friction, emotional friction, and spiritual friction, right? It can happen. Number 2, the rubbing of the surface of one body against the other or another. That's pretty interesting. 3, dissension or conflict between persons, nations, etc., because of difference of ideas and wishes and perceptions. So, now we can bring our belief systems into time causes friction. Okay, so we have time because we believe in the time, and because the way that this time has been structured in the physical reality, the 2D, I don't even believe we're in 3D. Don't even go there. And so what we're learning in the 2D is me, other, right? It's all about the two, the polarity, the duality, my mind against what's going on, what I perceive, my heart, how I feel about, what I perceive. It's all about the 2D, the two sides of my brain that correlate to the two sides of my body. Just, scales, seesaw. I mean, there's so much stuff in our reality that, indicates two. And so we haven't really quite figured this out yet. And I think it's like this 2D world has stretched us out into the two. To try to figure out our relation. Well, this is what I'm figuring out. My relationship to myself versus my relationship to everything else around me. And obviously, if my relationship to myself is not clear, it's not straightforward, then my relationship to everything outside of me is going to be not good, and it's going to have friction. It's going to be a life predicted by time, and the time is causing the friction. And then it's double created by my friction on multiple levels, how much friction I have to time and the world around me. And then other people's implied or imprinted collective, friction against that. I mean, talk about just bringing everything to a freaking standstill. Okay. All right, so this is just some stuff that I wrote, so I'm just going to put it out there. Not enough time, friction. So we live in a place where it's a life predicted by time. We have a schedule, and sometimes our schedules are, 3 months into the future. Sometimes, what I have to end up doing is I pay my GoDaddy bill for my Wi-Fi, or not my Wi-Fi, but for my, websites and hosting. Well, exactly in 1 year, I have to pay that again. So I'll write that in my schedule book. So I'm already causing friction, right? Because I've just gone outside of the now, which already has a lot of friction, because in the Kabbalistic view, time causes friction. And so, now I'm causing more friction by having to map ahead, creating that future payment in 1 year's time. So it's interesting how this world works. I mean, it really kind of brings you into a life predicted by time and, long-term time. Okay, in Kabbalistic thought, the friction brings out our darker self. So time causes friction, just stand alone. And so we have to work really hard to contain our darker self. And I really think this is what's creating a lot of anger and violence and hostility and me against you and, kind of stuff. And, the darker self causes tension in our bodies, in our environment, and with others, everything else around us. And so we trigger more of that friction, as the tension in our minds and our bodies and our self, gets, we feel like things are slowing down or things are standing in the way of what we want or desire, right? But want or desire is projected future outcome. So the time is being used, to create more friction. And this is kind of stuff that I'm just working on, like I've really been thinking about. So I just wrote in the blog today. It hasn't, I'll probably do more videos on it as I kind of think about it, but I'm kind of adapting it into, more of my shamanism and native teaching stuff too, because I think it all fits together. I think that there's lots of types of shamanism, Tibetan Buddhism, the Kabbalistic stuff. There's South American shamanism, Siberian shamanism. There's shamanism in, Hindu type systems. There's just a lot of, shamanism kind of everywhere. And I think it all kind of has like the same principles. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the invisible ninja, because they're principles, and ideas and perceptions that you might not automatically grasp at first glance. But if you start working them like a puzzle, they start to open up into multi-dimensional forms that can be worked with, mentally, emotionally, physically, or spiritually. And, I'm all about how can I create less friction and just in my own processes. And this is kind of an interesting thing because this morning, I'm just really thinking about what's my placement and, the friction that I may also be contributing to the already time is causing friction. And then, so I have to be at an appointment, and there's this huge parking lot here. And there's going to be some other people that are going to be here. And I thought it was really interesting. I parked kind of way in the off corner, so that my dog can have some space or whatever else. And the people that have the most friction here, that come here to this thing, they actually parked right next to me, which is causing out of a whole parking lot. And it's like they have to create drama and more friction, like a showdown. And here's my dog that's like attacking the window because, they parked right next to my van and they don't get it. They don't get it at all. It's my fault because, my dog is violent and hostile in the van. They don't get that they park so close to the van in a parking lot of 75 spaces that they could have chose from. And they could have chose one that was closer to the front door of the building. But no, and they've got to park right next to it, so they can barely open their driver's door and crawl out against my van. And it just makes my dog crazy because my dog can't figure it out. like what the hell are these people doing? So it's interesting because I'm working with this whole friction thing, and it just really dawned on me that, here are these people that are stuck in so much time causes friction and their own friction and their own major health crises, because of the friction that they're causing is causing this major friction, which is causing major tension in their bodies. And they're just, I used to think they're zombies, but they're just so stuck in their darker nature, even if they pretend to be so nice. I'm so nice. They're so dark because who would consciously do those things? I mean, if I park next to somebody's car in an empty parking lot and their dog was like totally freaking out, I mean, I would like back off like several spaces, but it's interesting how they need somebody to start shit with, which is they're starting the friction process already, right? So they're developing added friction to the already friction that exists, and then trying to imprint that friction onto me so that I'll add more friction, right? And I'm not so sure, like, it's about who they're going to be able to blame in the long run or whatever else. I just I think that that we're just caught up in this whole system of friction that people just are living that way. They've lived that way for generations. They aren't even conscious about what the things that they're doing, that they're just living in their darker nature, and they're just causing friction because that's just part of how they exist in the system, right? Which means they're always going to need something. They're always going to need a desire. They're always going to need more of something. They're never going to have enough because friction and flow are kind of complete opposites, right? So I've been really thinking about, friction just leads to the slowdown and the dragging. I mean, think about like a ship, and then they have to throw out an anchor. They've got their sails and they're jamming across the ocean, and the breeze is carrying them to their destination effortlessly on time. And then, somebody decides to pull the sails or, even leave the sails up and throw an anchor out. And it really slows the boat down. And on top of it, it starts to make the boat kind of start to turn off course a little bit, weave and bob, right? And they may have to throw out another 3 or 4 anchors in order to bring the boat to a complete halt, right? So, that I think that time causes friction, is like the events that are happening in real time. There could be, they're sailing and they're, really on track. They're doing super good on time. They're in the right wind. They're in the right current. They're jamming. And then all of a sudden a huge storm comes and changes the current, and then changes the wind. And so there's the friction. The initial time causes friction. And then, they end up throwing out an anchor and everything kind of gets, crazy. And then more people get involved with creating friction in a collective. And that's 4 more anchors and brings the boat completely to a stop. And you have no idea how long it's going to take you to get to port now with your goods, to get that paycheck, to get it into your bank, to pay bills. I mean, that's what it correlates to. It correlates to poverty. It correlates to disease, dis-ease, because you're constantly creating the friction that causes the dis-ease with everything around you and including internally, because you can't really work with the friction that time is causing in this reality. So there's going to be constant friction as it is. So you have to work really hard and steadily not to create more friction for yourself. Okay. Let's see. Tensions causes this dis-ease and slows the flow down. Our flow down even creates blocks, standstill at some point. Um, while the tension builds in our body because of the frustration, the irritation, the anger, hostility. And then we may act out violently, which is going to cause major, major friction with the world around us, right? So how it may play out, these are just kind of things I've been putting out there. Forecasting your future, creating our future from the now for tomorrow. So anything that we move from the now to tomorrow, which is like scheduling, the bills I have to pay, the paycheck that needs to go in the bank. How am I going to get this done? How am I going to get that done? Exercise, trying to lose weight, anything that moving to a new location, buying this or buying that. All of it, and not working a 9-to-5 job is a future forecast. Life predicted by time and time causing friction, right? So all that causes more friction onto the friction that already exists in this world. Our lifestyle, anything that has to do with our food or our home or our health or our job. Now, I'm not saying, let your house be totally disgusting. And don't do your laundry, don't schedule. The thing is, I'm saying is don't schedule to do all this stuff. Try to work with the friction that exists by being in the moment. And when in that moment, the perfect time, pops up, then you can go and handle the things that you want to handle. The whole job is a huge problem. As far as the friction. And then all of it, the friction, shortens our time. Our time is shortened because we don't have the time to do what we feel like we need to do in that moment. Like, I feel like, daily that I would really like to spend more time reading, more time journaling, and I'm working with nature more. And maybe that's what's happening is that because I am working more with nature and going out and tromping around and identifying plants and figuring out, what kind of medicines that, I would like to make when those plants are ready, right? And being more in the now, then I can have less friction to try to figure out, how that's going to play out. Anyway. All right. So, and I was thinking about also too, Carolyn Meese's work. She talked a lot about in early 90s about how we have like energy credits that we wake up with every day. We get like 200 credits that we get to spend that day. But most of us, by the time we're like 25, 20, we've already borrowed against our future, because we're in so much friction with our past, with our families, with this reality. Time creates friction. So the more time we're here, the more friction just inevitably is going to happen. And the more friction that we're causing. And so every time we think about, the past and what this person did to me and what that person did to me, or this happened or whatever, we're feeding the past and we're giving it our credits. That we're getting to run our whole biological, systems for a whole day. And most of us, by the time we're 10 years old, we've already borrowed into the future. And God knows how far we've borrowed. Maybe we were kind of, I hate that word destined, but, maybe we were like destined to live to 200 years old. And by age 10, we've already borrowed against our future biologically so much that we're only going to live to age 30. And this is our fault, right? And so, more like, so the energy credits could be more like the friction of time, that eats up that power and energy and credits. Because, think about it, if things slow down, how much time that's going to take. Like, washing my clothes at someone's house with one washer and one dryer, it takes forever. It could take days. Something that I have to do every day. But if I go to a laundromat, which I think is cheaper in the long run because I have the machines available that I need to use for whatever I need to use, I can take everything there at once. In the moment where it feels good, I would go, oh yeah, right now is a good time to do laundry. Not like, okay, I'm going to do laundry on Saturdays when my day's off. Now you just created friction because now your Saturday is consumed by things you have to do. So you may have to work harder to just get by, survive, stay afloat, stay where you are because of the friction that you're creating. And then I was working on, what other choices can we make to reduce personal friction? Like, if we can't really change time, causes friction, a life predicted by time. So how am I going to reduce my own personal friction? For example, do more things that I want to do. Read books, journal, don't schedule, there's a whole parking lot, and it's so interesting because the more that I'm talking and doing this video, now I have somebody parked on this side right next to the van, and now on the other side of the car with the people creating the friction initially, there's a car right there. And there's a whole parking lot. So it's interesting, like I'm watching how like maybe other people's energy field is bothered by my lack of creating personal friction. All right, and then removing my focus of time, especially towards money, and money in the United States equals time. So time causes friction. So guess what? Your money is going to cause friction. Making the money causes friction. Spending the money causes the friction. And that's your personal friction that you're also, you're starting to create a Fibonacci sequence here. Because you got the initial, friction. And then I come in and add to that friction with my personal friction. And then I've got the collective coming in and amplifying that friction, right? It's crazy. All right. How would, I was really thinking about how, this is kind of like the end. How would you know? Well, I think a lot of it comes back to how your body is going to be responding in the physical world to the friction, not only created by time, but also your personal friction, and then also the collective friction, right? That's kind of trying to be using you to help them create more friction, more excuses, more reasons, or whatever else, slowing down their own life from having energy and power, something to be disgruntled over. So physically, I think exhaustion, fatigue, tension. Remember, tension equals disease. Even if you're working out and your body has a lot of tension, you're not super flexible, you're in a disease state. I don't care how healthy you are. In my work, in structural medicine, tension and energy medicine, tension causes and equals all disease. And guess what? Tension is friction because it's the contraction of all of the blood flow, the nerve responses to the brain, even pulling the structural bones out of alignment, which is how the nerves run to communicate with the brain, so it shuts off all communication. It also creates more tension in the body, so you're creating more stress on the body, which is in fact killing microbes. So the tension is actually creating the disease itself, which is the inflammatory response and the lack of the body to communicate with the brain, so the brain can actually create solutions. So you're blocking all that off. So exhaustion, fatigue, tension, inflammation, headaches, vision, probably a lot of other stuff like emotional stress, irritation, frustration, anger, hatred, rage, nausea, dizziness, unhappiness, depression, scarcity. All these things are going to let you know like how severe your friction is, how many anchors you've got out in the waters that you're trying to get your sails up to get the boat moving and getting it in the current and the flow. And you're going to have causation from that because time causes friction. So you're always going to have some kind of friction going on. But you forget to take your anchors out because of all your personal influence on your own personal friction. Let's see. Time creates friction, and how you are creating added friction and blocks by spending your time in the future, projection, scheduling of how your time is already spent, i.e. 9 to 5, paying bills, spending, need, desire, how time is spent, time is being used, how others may use you in creating their own friction, adding you to their own personal friction, and how are you using others to create your own personal friction as well. So lastly, back to balance and neutrality, which is from my native, teachings. Not in the past and future, but in this moment. And doing, what comes next in the now, and not scheduling and projecting, kind of, so that you're kind of going in the flow as much as you can, which doesn't mean that you're going to get rid of time causes friction. You're not going to get rid of the already established friction that's going on. But how do you get yourself kind of, in a place in the now, be here now, being balanced so that you're not at least contributing more using your personal friction, which is going to amplify the friction that already exists. And then by that, being able to see and acknowledge how other people are going to use you as part of their fiction. Oh, I've got to go. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bridget Lynn Dogoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project. Hope this was helpful.